Estate Show with Pat Lopez, where we talk everything real estate. Once again, my guest is Chris Summers, KW Empower, for part 2 of the real estate lawsuit and the NAR settlement. Chris, welcome back again.
I mean, I didn't go too far, but I'm happy to be back for part 2. This is a very important conversation, for everyone in the industry and consumers too.
Right. Okay. So once again, disclaimer. These are things that we're reading as far as the agreement. Of course, the judge has to finalize everything. So we think we know what's going to happen, but we don't know 100%. So the buy side. In our conversation, you mentioned that the buyers agents have the biggest transition, have to get used to how to do things. And the number one thing that they have to do is from day one, before they show properties, they have to do like a buyer agency contract, and have to talk about commissions, which we have those forms already, right? But most people never did it right from day one.
Correct.
Elaborate.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately what's happening here, is, we talked about it on the listing side. You meet with a seller, you have a pretty thorough listing presentation, where things are signed and filled out and complete and people understand the process. On the buy side, if you think about that, how often is that done early in the process? And I think from a practicality standpoint, will that happen, from the very first time? Well, theoretically it should be. Yeah, but if not, it needs to be done early on anyway. And if you think about it, Pat, the buyers deserve the communication and transparency. So like in the beginning of the process, whether it's before or, ultimately we'll see what the practices will be as far as more will be revealed, is that buyer deserves to know ultimately how realtors get compensated in real estate. I think a lot of the mistakes that were made coast to coast. Maybe it's not as much in Pennsylvania, but it'd be like, oh, work with me, I'll help you buy the house. It doesn't cost you anything, right? That's the mistake,
right?
And if the buyer doesn't realize that, hey, that the commission is built into the sale price, there's a listing commission, in turn that comes back to the buyer's agent. They should know that, right? And they should know ultimately the process. So I think, transparency becomes really important. And long story short, the buy side will need to work a little bit more. Sometimes, if you think about it, like they'll send their buyers to an open house, and then they're interested and they write an offer because they know them, right? Or whatever that might look like, where that process just needs to be more thorough up front. And if you think about it, that will benefit the industry as a whole.
Right. So just to explain a little bit, Pennsylvania, there's buyer agency. There's a lot of states that really don't have that. So it's a mixed bag. I forget what the numbers were, 16, 18, states don't or do or whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of agents already been doing their buyer agency, filling it out and explaining. Because right now, if I put in, my commission is 3%, and I put in a conveyancing fee of $395. If the seller is only paying 2.5%, by all right, I could go back to my buyer today and say, hey, you owe me 0.5%. Right? So that's already there. Most agents never did it. They just accepted what was being offered, by the seller and the listing agent, because goes through the seller to the listing agent to the buyer's agent. So I just want to clarify that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, I mean, that's a really good point, Pat, because I am past president of GPAR, the Greater Philadelphia Association of Realtors, and I don't know all the facts about states, but I do know that Pennsylvania has been way ahead of this,
right?
And I do know in Philadelphia, this is already happening, right? So like what we're talking about isn't really changing too much at all, because we already practice buyer agency and really are in it. And these conversations are being had, with the consumers. And these cases do come up, where the realtor might get some compensation, from the buy side. So this is like a little bit more in there. And I think we have to give a shout out, to PAR, Pennsylvania Association of Realtors, combined with GPAR, because it sounds like, maybe it was the Wild West out there, but maybe it wasn't.
Right.
Yeah, but I think, these issues, We're probably in states outside of Pennsylvania. I'm not positive about that. But yeah, I mean, I think so with that, which was always the case before, and maybe more the case now, even more so on the buy side. If I'm helping you purchase a property, which I'm happy to do so, when that next time comes, is for people to really, or if you're the realtor, to really go through the value proposition.
Right.
Why are you using me, or what is, the value? And it's significant. It's not just opening a door and la la la. Every once in a while, there are transactions that are easier, but more often than not, you talk to most people, that have bought or sold a home, and they'll say, I thank the heavens, that I had, representation to help me. So that value proposition is really important, to convey, and Pennsylvania is ahead of the game.
Okay. So now the agreement or some of the things that were in the agreement was one, that there'd be no commission on the MLS, that field wouldn't even be there. Prior, you could put $100, you could put $1, you could do whatever, but you had to put something and the field was there. So that's going to be gone. So the challenge for a buyer's agent is they don't know what they're going to get paid, or they may not know, because there's ways to get around that. And number two is they have to talk commission from day one. They can't turn around and say, hey, meet me at XYZ property, 123 Main Street. I want to see it. Well, yeah, you could do that, but make sure you have your buyer's agent, paperwork with you and go over it, because you need to get that signed before you show that home. So that's a big difference. Now, I just had a conversation with an agent, and the conversation was, well, I'm going to feel funny. It's a referral. And I turned around and I said, okay, on your listings, it's your best friend. It's a referral. It's your cousin. You don't have a problem at all walking in with papers. You don't list the property without signing a listing agreement. So I asked, what's the difference? What's the difference from day one, if you're going to list a property, versus day one, you sitting down talking to the buyer's agent of saying, this is what I'm going to do for you, and this is how I'm going to get paid. And she couldn't say anything. She was like, I guess you're right.
And ultimately, you are right, and that is the big picture. It's like, to me, this will elevate the professionalism of buyer's agents. And basically, yeah, there's going to be some more work up front, with this type of high level communication. And when you get to the point, of, when you're searching for properties, yeah, you're going to need to do a little legwork, one more step, which isn't going to take too long. And I'm sure there'll probably be ways where maybe people can get that information quicker versus calling, email, or texting. But yeah, they'll need to find out what the compensation is for each property, or certainly before you submit an offer. So to me, those little steps might be aggravating to some people, but the train's left the station, right?
Right.
These are going to be the changes, so either you adopt and get better and grow. And I do believe that people that do that can grow significantly, or not. But a little bit more work up front to achieve, this. You want to hear my bike riding analogy?
Go ahead.
Okay, I shared this with a few people. Yeah, I like, it was last week. It was windy. It was cold, Pat. I needed to get from somewhere. I'm like, I should probably just ride my bike there, and I did. But it was so cold and so windy, especially on the way back, because it was at night. But when I got back to my destination, I felt great.
Right.
That bike ride, it was a little harder, but I was exhilarated when I got back. And not to say that's going to be the thing with buyer's agents or whatnot, but I think, by raising your game or having a harder workout at the gym, that end result can be a little bit better, and your clients are going to thank you for it. So I think ultimately that's that upfront preparation, communication will lead to thing. And not for nothing, the consumers deserve the transparency.
Right. Okay. So what do you see? I mean, these are my thoughts, but once again, I've sold 0 properties in my life. That's not what I do. So what do you think is a buyer's agent has to do? Do you think they need a buyer's presentation? You go out and you have a listing presentation, and it may not have to be all paperwork, but you have to convey, hey, this is what I do. Do you know what a appraisal gap contingency is? Do you know the timeline of how many days I have to apply for a mortgage, how many days I need to do a home inspection? Do you know the timelines for, asking for repairs and on and on and on? I mean, the contract has things in there, and an average person wouldn't necessarily know that. So if I'm a buyer's agent, I think my job is to convey, hey, this is what I do. And the biggest one, how do you know what the house is actually worth? Because you, as a professional, you have the MLS, you can do a CMA, you could see and get a general idea and just knowledge of selling houses. More or less what the house is worth. If I'm average Joe, how do I know if I'm paying $20,000 over price? On a normal market, 30% of all listings have a reduction. So that means out of the gate, maybe somebody overpriced the house. That's why there was a reduction. So if I'm not represented, how do I know that? And how can I know that if I'm not in the business? I mean, these are some of the things I would be saying, I would think. But once again, I don't sell anything. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, it gets back to being able to intelligently communicate that value proposition. And in my mind, again, being past president of GPAR, is that's always been the case. People do an excellent job of that already. They go through the agreement of sale before they submit an offer. And then maybe sometimes they do that at the end. They show a bunch of properties, but I think the opportunity for buyer presentations in the beginning, to kind of go through things on a deeper level makes sense for our team, for example, Pat, the Summers team. Saying, we have like a packet, for sellers. We have a packet for buyers that we can share with their consumers.
Right.
Hey, this is who we are. This is what we do. This is what we plan on going over with you, whether you're a buyer or a seller. And that is something, if we meet with someone, we could hand it to them, or send it, in a digital fashion to provide, examples, again, maybe, to get to that point where you're having that conversation. Like during the COVID days, this is maybe more so on the listing side, people would have like, the Zoom,
Right.
listing appointments, or the same thing with the Zoom, buyer appointments, where you're going over the agreement of sale. And that could still be the case today. Like you see a property, okay, well, let's, or, beforehand, hey, let's do that buyer presentation. Or, hey, Pat, let's take 20 to 30 minutes, one day this week to go into the agreement of sale, in the beginning, what to expect, kind of share, practices with you. So when we get to the point where we're writing an offer, well, we've already would have talked about that a little bit. But so I think these are all pillars of opportunities where that value proposition, can be communicated, in the beginning, and then onward, and then ultimately, the clients will experience, the value proposition that, that was served from contract, from showings to contract and then contract to close.
Okay. So the big change for the buyer's agent, they're going to see nothing because there's not going to be a field for the compensation. Now, can it be on, people's private website, that kind of thing? But even if the seller, because the seller can choose and always have been able to choose, say, I'm not going to give a commission. This is where that conversation up front is going to have, you're going to have where you're going to turn around in your offer, you're going to write it in the contract saying, hey, I want to get paid 2.5%. That's a negotiation. And that negotiation starts when you submit your offer. So now the seller can come back and say, no, I'm not going to pay 2.5%. The most I'm going to pay is 2. And that's where you would have to go back to your buyer and say, listen, we can get this wrapped up, but now you're going to owe me 0.5%, or you're going to owe me 1%. And these conversations have to be done in the very beginning, because you will have some sellers in super hot markets that may turn around and say, I'm not giving any commission, or I'm giving only 1%, right? I mean, is that a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, it gets back to that chicken and egg we kind of talked about a little bit, with part one,
Right.
on the listing side, which in my mind, but more will be revealed, is, most listing agents, because they want maximum exposure, that, will be there. Maybe that exact percentage might, and this is common where, maybe a buyer agent wants 3 and, The list, it's 2.5. Well, that's up to them. How many people are actually getting that from their buyer in today's market? I don't know. But yeah, in those cases where, the buyer side is zero or small and the value proposition is there, in my mind, what I foresee, is that sale price will be lower, as an account of less exposure, and the buy side theoretically might be getting a little bit better of a deal, so they're paying it over here. Where if it was built in to a sale price or a mortgage, maybe it's about the same. I just don't see that happening too much,
Okay.
Matt. I see it being more, again, the people that are part of their associations, when you're on listing appointments, because the goal is to get maximum exposure. And let's face it, like a lot of these first time home buyers, think about our transfer tax.
Right. It's not.
Let's go after the transfer tax. I won't go into that too much, but that's set in stone. It's the highest in the country. Buy side's paying what, 2 point something, a
Yeah.
sell side. But anyway, but like a lot of these first time home buyers, I mean, they don't have the extra money for that. So I would think for the majority of those listings of the properties that the buyer's agent is showing, I would hope, that to attract that exposure, that's there. More would be revealed on that, but I don't think, that that's going to be. I do have my other predictions, in the industry itself, but I don't think that is going to but those situations might happen, right?
Right.
And the agent will need to prepare for that accordingly.
Okay. And just a comment, 2023, you had approximately 55% of all Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loans were done by first-time homebuyers. So it's a huge percentage, and the population of millennials, which are the prime buying age from 30 to 35, is 72 million. So it's huge, that group. And you are right. Those are the people first time in the market. They're not selling a house, walking away with 100,000. They're the ones that would struggle in your scenario as far as that.
Correct.
Now, but it is a possibility, and it's a conversation that has to be had, because I do see, and once again, I've sold 0 properties. I've probably said this about 10 times, but I do see some uh, sellers, especially in the suburban market, because I just got done where my client didn't get the house. There were 22 offers, and it went over like 50,000 over ask. So in some of those marketplaces, I could see sellers and maybe even listing agents saying a strategy, hey, we don't have to pay it. We have 22 offers, we're going to get the money.
Correct.
Right. I mean, but I think Philadelphia is a pretty good market where it's a little bit more balanced. Certain areas, because real estate is local, but I mean, that's just my thoughts as far as that. I mean, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, and if you think about it, I mean, those crazy markets, I think things like that are happening already. Like even like in the past, like maybe I helped you buy land. I don't remember, or like land gets very competitive. As a buyer's agent, sometimes you'll just forego the commission, right? And then the listing side keeps it, or it goes to the consumer. So for the people that are structuring these offers, in these very competitive markets, they have the ability to kind of make that decision ahead of time,
Right.
to make their offer stronger. And I could see, a seller might be like, hey, I'm getting all this, exposure. But if you think about it, Pat, where are they getting the exposure from?
The MLS.
The
Right,
MLS,
and the
right?
buyers. Yeah.
And it's not like, and yeah, that might be a little bit of an easier deal perhaps with the listing side, the buy side, and once you're under contract, the appraisals are waived, and that market will change. But ultimately, if you think about it, if it wasn't for the MLS generating that exposure, generating that interest, the strategy on the listing side, to push that value up. If I'm a seller, I'm much, much happier to pay a higher commission, and to have the highest price for the best terms than a lower commission with not as much exposure, which I'd say 9 times out of 10, that net price is going to be lower.
Right.
So kudos to our MLS.
Right there. Okay. So once again, on the buyer side, buyer agency contract, day one, you have to talk about commissions, how they work, and there is a possibility that the buyer will have to pay some, because most likely, I think the seller will pay some, and if it's not enough, then the buyer will have to pay. Okay. You don't know 100% because on the MLS that field's gone, so you don't know when you put the offer in. But once again, you can put the offer in with compensation to the buyer's agent. So there's nothing preventing you from saying, "Hey, seller, you pay me my commission." Like we talked about prior, cream rises to the top, and I think this and what you mentioned as well will bring more professional agents out, and there's going to be a lot of agents that are uncomfortable having these conversations from day one and being like a knowledge broker, to coin that phrase, and they may feel that real estate isn't right for them because value, you have to bring value, you have to bring knowledge, you have to bring expertise, because if you're just a door opener, that's not going to get somebody to sign that buyer agency agreement and saying, "Hey, potentially on a $300,000 house, I'm going to pay you, $7,000 to $9,000." I mean, that's my thoughts. What are yours?
I mean, the industry's hard, Pat. Yeah, I think you mentioned it. As past president of GPAR again at new member orientation, I use over under terms sometimes.
Right.
That the over under for the bulk of realtors is 2 years. Most realtors don't make it past 2 years. And after that, it's hard. There's expenses, there's time, there's stress, there's anxiety. The drinking percentage of realtors, not to go deep, suicide. It's higher than any industry out there, or super high.
Right.
And so there's stress. So yeah, ultimately for the people that aren't doing as many sales now anyway, they might just say, you know what, screw it. But for the ones that are, and especially with these changes, the listing inventory is going to matter more, because I think that flow of information will just be more streamlined and congruent for the people that are around that. So I do believe in my heart, that, people might leave, they might join a team or leave one brokerage to
Right.
join another. And I think ultimately, like any other industry, we talked about this on the listing side too, is the benefit, for many that are strong now, is the strong will get stronger. And for the realtors that have the value proposition, maybe they're not at a top office, but they have the work ethic, they can get stronger too. If they think about using this as an opportunity, maybe they're doing some social media, some YouTube. Hey, I'm the communicator realtor. I will navigate you through this process. But the thing is, they're doing it already.
Right.
So we could just do it a little bit better, and everyone be happy. But I do think like the larger offices, well, this, at least for them, could be a recruiting benefit. The team trend, will continue, to grow as well. And at the same time, this could be much ado about nothing.
Right.
But at the same time, we kind of obviously see the writing on the wall where, some more work is going to be required. And I think most of that work is going to be on the buy side.
Right. And then just think about it. If you have your uncle, wants to buy a house, and you go over, and the first thing you have to do is you have to go over, the compensation, the buyer's agency, and saying, "Well, you want to buy a $300,000 house? Well, I charge $9,000." They said, "Hold up, you've been an agent for 2 days, and you want me to?" So
Yeah.
I think that's where some of the pushback, and that's where I think what you're mentioning, some of the teams and some of the training,
Correct.
and what I'm saying is being an expert and really, really treat it as a business. I think some of the part-time people, or people thinking they can get in part-time, may rethink that. So there's going to be changes, but I do agree with you. I don't think the changes are going to be that big.
Correct. And I mean, it gets back to anything in life, right? If your mindset is blah, your output, and what comes from that, your success is going to be blah.
Right.
If you're consumed by fear and change, chances are you're just not going to be in the game as much. Like I'll use a Gary Keller quote, right? Real estate is a contact sport. How many people are you meeting with this week, today? How many people are in your pipeline? Is your database growing? The business isn't going to change, but the work part of it is. So yes, it's going to change, but ultimately at the end of the day, contract to close is going to be the same thing. these changes, ultimately, I don't really see the huge benefits of them. But at the same time, I do see how communication to clients, this is the opportunity, to step up one's game or a brokerage's game. But I'm, our brokerage at KW Empower, like there's 1,000 agents there, Pat.
Right.
Think about how many listings, the brokerage has.
Right. Exactly.
Will dual agency as a brokerage increase as a result of this? Probably.
Right.
And think about all the people that are so opposed to that, but these are the unintended consequences that could happen as a result.
Okay. So I think we went over that. Now, you are an agent. You do listings, you do buyers, you have a team. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you, Chris, how would they do that?
I appreciate, the plug there.
A little commercial here, right?
I got Pat Loans on the mortgage side, but the Summers team is pretty easy to find on social media, Instagram, the Summers team, Facebook, the Summers team of Philadelphia. Typically, we're out of our Fishtown office, within the new merger, KW Empower, 1405 Frankfurt Avenue, right, in a hot spot there, but very easy, to get a hold of. And not for nothing, our team is growing.
Right.
Like we added 3 agents in the last 2 weeks. Is it a result of this? I don't know. But could it be? Maybe.
Right.
But yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for coming on and sharing. I think it's pretty valuable, especially since there's a lot of misleading information out there. And I think somebody who's in the business day in and day out, working it, having a team, having, 20 plus agents, that you're working with day in and day out. I really want to hear your perspective as far as that's concerned.
Yeah. And we mentioned that on the part 1, but yeah, that all those misleading headlines, like if you're thinking about getting into real estate, if you see those headlines, you're saying, I'm not doing that. Or maybe you're kind of struggling and the headlines are just so misleading.
Right.
And so clickbait. So yeah, I think you're right, Pat. It's really important to be around people that could really look at this in a positive, optimistic manner, and what is, the pathway to success. But those headlines make me, I don't really get angry that much.
Right.
But when I saw some of those headlines, I got angry.
Right.
But what could I really do? But I guess what we could do is this.
Right.
And stay positive, right, and have the mindset to help others.
Okay, great. Well, that's the Real Estate Show with Pat Lopez, where we talk everything real estate. Be sure to follow the show on Facebook, Instagram, and subscribe. Be sure to subscribe. I have great guests on, like Chris Summers. And give me your comments. Tell me things that you like, you don't like. Remember, this show is everything real estate, no limits. Hope you enjoyed the show. See you next.